You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders, for coders, about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. It's almost the new year, and this week we're reviewing our predictions for 2016 and making new ones for 2017. We'll briefly look at the predictions we made last year and see which came to be and which were way off. Then we'll each make 4 predictions for the upcoming year. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
Man, my sinuses are hosed. They have been for probably 3 or 4 weeks at this point.
Oh man.
It's just, it got real dry around here, and we had a little bit of fire further east mostly, but a lot of the smoke was making it here. And that's when it started, and I just cannot get it cleared out. I mean, I'm taking Benadryl. I've taken antibiotics for it. I've done shots of hot sauce. I mean, I cannot get my sinuses clear.
Hot shots.
Yeah, you just do a shot of Tabasco sauce and then use the neti pot so that it just blows everything out of your sinuses, and 10 minutes later it's back.
Oh man,
how does that even get in there? So yeah, I'm having that kind of fun. I did get my Comcast issues resolved, however. I know I've been complaining on here for ever.
Yeah, you got yours resolved, and I started having issues with Comcast.
Yeah, but that's not my problem. It's your problem now.
That's true.
Passing that torch on. Yeah, I've actually ended up filing an FCC complaint because when I canceled I discontinued my business account, they were like, "Oh yeah, you can transfer it over to residential, and you're fine." And we waived the disconnect fee. Okay, cool. That's what I was told on the call, and then I got a bill for $1,000 for a disconnect when I had to stay at the house waiting on them. They never showed up, so they disconnected it remotely. Huh. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that'll be $1,000." And I'm like, "That'll be no." Went back and forth. I called. I couldn't get a hold of anybody that could make a decision. So I finally filed an FCC complaint last Wednesday or Thursday. And they called me today. And, of course, you hear, "Oh, it's Comcast." Bear in mind, I'm pretty agitated because they've cost me several $1,000s at this point. I get my phone and I get up and I walk out of my office. I walk downstairs to the room, that's away from everybody because I assume I'm going to be doing some yelling. I go down there and dude's like, so yeah, basically the long and short of it is we screwed up and we're fixing it. And that was it. And, I had the adrenaline ramp up, while I was going down there, and then there's no fight.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
And you just go back to the office and, I walk in and my boss looks at me and, he didn't say anything, but it was kind of there was no yelling. What happened? And then I was out of sorts for a good 30 minutes after that because I was pre-ticked before the call, and then it was just oh yeah, it's resolved. Also this week, and this is kind of a mix between your updates and my updates because we were both here last Friday. We both worked I worked from home and you worked from here part of the day, and you worked from home part of it because we got interviewed on .NET Rocks.
Yes, which will be coming out
30th or 31st.
Around that time.
It's the last one of the year.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on their editorial calendar.
We did, they interviewed us about the apprenticeship that we did an episode on here about.
Yeah.
And got a lot of good remarks from, and then they wanted to talk to us about it. And so we interviewed with them. Guys, it's like I told my mom, we're kind of like a Beatles cover band that got asked to play a set with Paul McCartney.
Yeah. That was a little unexpected. I'm the one that wrote the email to pitch it because I got a wild hair last Monday, 3:00 in the afternoon. I was like, let's see what happens. Yeah, it'll probably fail, but whatever, dream big. So I pitched the idea, got here, and we were scrambling to get stuff set up. I think I was a little bit behind on the outline, and there was other stuff going on, and we had a compressed schedule. And so we're both kind of agitated, and so I didn't say anything to you. And then we have all the equipment set up for the podcast recording. I'm like, I ought to look at my email. And they're like, yeah, we want you on.
Yeah, so Will's reaction was, "Beej, I'm sorry." And I'm like, "What'd you do?" Because I didn't know what he did. If he'd got us an advertiser or something like that.
Well, I kind of didn't tell you that I was going to do this. I just sort of, yeah.
You're like, you got to come see. And I'm like, what'd you do? And he's like, no, just walk around and look at my computer.
Yeah. Because it was one of those things where, like, I kind of did this without really discussing it, which we try not to do that just as a rule, so we don't both pitch things or whatever, but we had both agreed that this was something that was further out. And so I knew you hadn't pitched it. And so then when it worked, you know, we had the like, oh, that's awesome. And then we had like the mini panic attack because it's like, hey, we have no plan for it working. We have to fix this.
Yeah.
And we did. And I think it went pretty well. So anyway, that's coming out. So what else do you have going on?
So, well, you were talking about your sinuses. I've been fighting some kind of virus this past week. I was out a day and a half last week and then got sent home on the day I returned by the executive director of the department because I apparently looked miserable. And she said, you need to go home. She's like, you can work from home. I trust you'll work from home, but go home. That way, if you need to lay down, you can just go to bed.
Fair enough.
No, and so I was out of commission Wednesday last week.
I don't know what this junk is that's going around, but it's awful. Like, my wife has had it for longer than I have. It's been like 5 weeks for her, just constant sinus stuff.
Well, I'm not the only one. Apparently, I was the vector, though, because I got sick, and then 2 days later, 2 or 3 other people at work got sick. I haven't really been fighting much code, to be honest. I am going to be spending the next few days in a class on creating reports in SQL.
Oh, the SSRS?
SSRS, yeah. So that's going to be pretty cool. But let's go ahead and roll the music. This week for IoTs, I have a fun project that you can do with the family called the New Year's Eve Ball Drop in Your Kitchen. And you can build this from stuff you may have lying around your house if you're an IoT geek like us, or the people over at Hackaday where I found this article. The ball is made from an old Christmas tree ornament filled with LEDs and a 9-volt battery. The base that holds the rod also has an Arduino, a servo motor, and an LED screen. The servo drops the ball by spooling yarn that loops over the top of the rod. And it's kind of a pretty cool project, especially if you have kids that might be staying up for their first New Year's Eve celebration, or if you have kids that may be a little young to stay up that late, you can kind of let them have their own countdown. So I'll post the hardware and a link to the article in the show notes. Who's talking to us this week?
Well, we grabbed a tweet from Leo Jerez at Complete Dev Pod. Hey, found you guys through at Programazing. I'm digging the quality and content of your cast. Keep up the good work. And
at Programazing is one of our fans that he's already gotten some stuff from us. But thanks, Leo. Send us a DM on Twitter because we've got some Complete Developer swag just for you. And guys, if you'd like your very own Complete Developer swag, leave us a review in iTunes or comment on the website or any of our social media. We are now on Path and Tumblr, and we post all of our episodes to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google+. So last year we started this tradition at the end of the year where we made predictions for the following year. At the time, we didn't have previous predictions because, well, the year before, we didn't have a podcast. So we didn't have any to review, so we made a total of 6. This year and in the future, we're going to be reviewing our previous predictions and making 3 or 4 predictions for the coming year. So let's get started. My first prediction last year was that larger watch companies would begin to integrate IoT wearables into their devices. It would take over more of the traditional watch face.
And so what do we give this one, a hit or a miss?
I think we give it a little bit of a hit. We've got some major watch companies with screen watches, so...
Yeah, I mean, when I was going back through the outline, I was like, I have no idea how to even evaluate this. And I couldn't get an answer with Google search, so I left it open because I'm like, well, I'm not even watching this space.
Well, some of the major watch companies are making bands to go with, or covers and stuff to go with, like the smartwatches. Huh. So I think they're on their way. I think this gets a hit.
And my first one was increased government demands for backdoors to encryption. And we're going to call that a direct hit.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's pretty ominous. It's going to be ominous again, probably forever. I mean, this was kind of a cop-out prediction, to be 100% honest, because we knew this was coming.
Mm-hmm. My next prediction, Bitcoin loses value due to regulations of the banking industry getting involved. Honestly, Bitcoin looks stable when indexed against the dollar, but then the dollar isn't buying much.
Yeah, it's not buying as much as it was this time last year. And I'm not sure, like, I'm not an economic analyst. And so, I looked at the numbers and I'm going, well, it looks kind of stable-ish comparatively. But, again, the dollar has lost some earning power as well. And I don't know how that masks Bitcoin. Like, I don't know how the index is calculated. So, and I'm not really all that interested to find out because that's a little bit more financial math than I want to get into.
I'm going to call this one a miss because I thought there would be like I was predicting the bubble to pop on Bitcoin and it didn't. It may have deflated a little bit, but it did not pop.
So my second prediction was Microsoft announcing MS Linux. And this was a hit-ish, kind of. There is a Linux subsystem for Windows now. And they're trying to get things more POSIX compliant and, fix a lot of issues. And you can also write PowerShell in Linux if you have that kind of pain tolerance. So it was a glancing blow, I guess, is probably the best way to put this.
Hey, .NET Core has made some big improvements in that field, too, because you can write pretty much anything .NET now.
Well, yeah, of course, forms and stuff, you use mono and all that. But, yeah, I mean, there's options on there. And so I think that it's coming. It's just, it took a little bit longer than I predicted. But, my prediction was that they would actually come up with a distro. And so far, that has not been forthcoming.
So my third prediction, the vaping industry bubble bursts as more places ban vaping in public, with possibilities in the growing recreational marijuana market as more states legalize it. And this is a little bit of a mixed bag because we're still waiting on the vaping industry kind of to pop because it grew too quick, too big, too quick, I guess. And though more states are making recreational marijuana legal.
Yeah, so that'll probably be a thing. The other thing, too, is that the health consequences of vaping, more stuff is going to come out one way or the other. And so it's still a wild card. So this wasn't quite a miss. It wasn't quite a hit. It was a shot that's not fired yet.
Yeah.
My third prediction was major IoT hacks with possible loss of life. This was a direct hit. We had the East Coast of the U.S. that lost internet. Not too long ago, there's been a bunch of hits on hospitals and everything else. No reported deaths, but the cases where there have been IoT hacks against hospitals, they're not going to report deaths because, hey, that's a big honking medical malpractice lawsuit potentially. Mm-hmm. So I would still call that a pretty direct hit other than the deaths.
So my fourth one, which was a bit of a wild card, was that we would start seeing 1 petabyte drives on the upper end of affordable.
And my comment was, this is true for Arab oil princes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, because it's pocket change for them. It's, it's $100,000.
Yeah. I have seen some 500 terabyte drives.
Yeah. And some of the storage arrays are getting on up there, and the price is continuing to drop. So it's just a matter of time. This is, another one of those things. Predictions are hard.
This was a miss for what I was predicting, but I was expecting it to be a miss. So
yeah, that's kind of your wild prediction.
This was the wild prediction.
My fourth one last year was major IDEs, that's integrated development environments, getting increasingly cheaper / free, even for high quality versions as cloud-based hosting becomes a larger part of the portfolio of development companies and as OS agnostic approaches become more common and easier. I would call this a hit. I
would too. Yeah, this is a dead on hit.
And again, that was sort of a cop-out one because, that trend line was getting more obvious by the day.
Let's see. Number 5 for me, a rise in long-term code schools to eventually replace the boot camp craze. 9 to 12-month programs such as the Nashville Software School, Launch School, Iron Yard. Also, more diversity in languages to include .NET and MeanStack. And honestly, Will and I both agree that this is pretty much a hit.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to take a little bit longer to completely manifest just because education doesn't move that fast, and there's a lot of capital investment and a lot of that sort of stuff going on. I know when we were over at NSS, they're building out right now.
Yeah.
that's not an instant process. It's not like, oh, you just flip the switch and it goes live. Like this is real, real estate, real assets, real, marketing. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. And so I would call this a hit simply because, yes, it's very clear that it's going there, real soon.
I would say that a little bit of a corollary or slight change to it would be that they're not so much replacing code like the coding boot camps, whereas the boot camps are kind of becoming precursors.
Yeah.
For these longer term things where it's like you get accepted into a 9 to 12 month program and they say, okay, before you start, your pre-work is to go through this month or 2 month.
Yeah. And that's actually a fairly reasonable approach because it'll filter people without them costing as much money. Mm-hmm. And it increases the success rate of the main school and it doesn't build up a tremendous amount of student loan debt. Like it's recoverable if you get $10,000 of debt. It's not if you get 50. So my number 5 prediction was a bubble pop in tech in terms of education, mostly as a result of the higher ed bubble popping with better, cheaper competition on the sidelines. Now, the higher ed bubble has not popped. In fact, it is worse. Mm-hmm. That's generally pretty easy to agree upon at this point. It's early December when we're recording this, so if nothing happens in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we can call that part of it a miss. However, ding dong, the witch is dead. ITT Tech took a dirt nap. So we can also call it a hit from that side.
My final prediction last year was that our show would reach over 100 regular listeners per episode. we are way over that. We thought that was a big number.
Yeah, we thought that was optimistic, and it's like, I think try 450.
Yeah, we hit that within the first month or two of the year. I mean, it was like, and then also the beginning of an open community of mentors and mentees to interact. We kind of have that.
Yeah, with the Code Newbies stuff, and of course, we've also rebranded. There's been some. We're not directly associated with Code Newbies anymore. We're in their pipeline, I guess, but they sort of went a different direction, and we really liked a lot where we were. So
we liked where they started, and the direction they were going is probably good for them.
Yeah,
and
we just can't logistically handle it with all the stuff that we already do.
Yeah, so we really liked where it was, and there was an opportunity for us to say, "Hey, we're going to stay loosely associated with you guys, but not a direct line from you." And so we took it. And I think that is best for both groups. And then the other one was giveaways for commenting on the show.
If you'd like a bag of free swag, contact us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. My 6th prediction for 2016 is Beej finally gets that coding job. And he did get some contract work in April that was from me. Mm-hmm. And he did get some contract work from a client of mine somewhere around there. I forget. I don't remember if it's before or after because that was a little bit more important to you. And then you got a job in August?
Started July 5th.
July 5th. Okay.
So I actually got the job in June.
Yeah. So the comment in the outline is, oh, yes. and that's pretty much the end of that.
Yeah.
So I guess now we go to the predictions for the next year. Boom, boom, boom.
So going into 2017, Will and I each made 4 predictions for the coming year. My first one is there will be an increase in Internet of Things security products and services available, including smart home security.
I'm hoping for this because I want to do the smart home thing. There's a lot of stuff that I've seen and I'm like, hey, that's really cool. Like I like the little, I hate to say this, I like the light bulbs that you can change color.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm just thinking for my work area, there's times I would really use that. And right now I'm like, I'm not letting this crap on my network until you guys can kind of lock it down a little bit. That's not going to be a thing. I'm really picky about who I let on my network. Like you're allowed on my network. Everybody else is on the guest network, including my wife.
Wow.
It's mainly just because you have to have access to things. Otherwise you wouldn't be on there either. Yeah. I'm a little paranoid about security, especially with wireless, because I know it goes outside the house. In fact, my router really, really pumps the signal out further than I would expect. It's great when you download podcasts in the morning, but when you're sitting there and you're like 250 yards from the router and you're going, hey, I can get reasonable download speeds here. that means people can like push stuff at me from here. And, I don't really have control of this territory. So I'm hoping to see that.
Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be, we've already talked about some on the show in IoTs, a few security products and things like that. And I think there's going to be a major increase in the security products and services. There may be companies even started just for IoT security.
I would agree with that.
I think that's a corollary to this, is that there will be IoT security companies coming out within the next year.
Well, and I expect there's some already waiting that have built products and are just waiting for the first, fatality or, something along those lines. And, once it hits the news, then, fun things happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
My first prediction for 2017 is internet providers will scramble to get rid of net neutrality so that they can continue their rip-off practices. Adjective added by me, aided by the big money interests who keep Congress people as pets. You can tell I'm a little cynical and a little bitter about this. The tendency of these media conglomerates to buy Congress people to be able to play shenanigans with bills and things is pretty well known, and it's also pretty bad. I also know that a lot of the net neutrality proposals are not really net neutrality so much as they're cost shifting. Of, like if somebody's got Netflix, they want to shift the cost onto people that are not using it.
Well, did you know that
for the build out and all that? But,
did you know in the state of Tennessee, it is illegal to share your Netflix password?
Yep.
Like you can go to jail for it. Not fine. You can do jail time.
Yeah,
it's a misdemeanor, but you could still do 11 months, 29 days of jail.
Right. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff, but it's not really the Netflix password thing so much as it is they have to build out a lot to do streaming. People want to push the cost of that onto everybody else. Sort of like with sports, sports TV tends to do that as well. That the cost of that goes out onto all the people, whether they use it or not, because they have to build up streaming capacity for the whole network for what the peak load is, not what the base load is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And because of that, I'm expecting these cable companies to start, just cracking the whip and trying to get rid of net neutrality because that threatens that model. Mm-hmm. Of course, what they could also do is go after the movie producers and these companies that produce video content that doesn't necessarily have to be streamed. And they could say, hey, guys, you're going to have to let us allow download. In other words, you pull it to some box on your network or, local, and then you watch it from there. And then you don't have all the interruptions. So they don't have to keep as high of a level of service and as much throughput in the network. And they could work on their load that way, but they're not gonna because it's a giant media conglomerate, Congress, and you.
Yeah.
The wolves are going to eat that sheep. So that's my number one prediction and rant.
I can tell already that mine are going to be more fun and yours are going to be more doom and gloom.
Yep.
Very typical. So my number 2 prediction is that we're going to have, at some point in the next year, robotic chefs available to the public. And I'm not talking about the Rube Goldberg machine from Back to the Future, but Elon Musk actually talked about this. They have a robotic chef that can cook over 2,000 dishes. And I'm predicting that it's probably going to be more on the high end, but it is going to be available to the public within the year.
I don't know about within the year, but I mean, like, and it's not so much the home, but like industrial kitchens and I don't know, McDonald's, places where people are pushing for a $15 an hour wage. Like, that's great and all. You're bringing the future in. Literally, like, they're going to cut staff so that they can keep their prices as low as they do. And the way they do that is through automation. So we're probably going to see more of that. And that's not to say whether people deserve $15 an hour or not for a job. It's just a thing of, hey, now they're pushing the economic incentive in this direction. It's really important to look at these things and go, what is a value neutral way of looking at it and try to understand what is going to be the output? Because when you get emotional about it, it doesn't help anything. You're going to make bad predictions. I would like to see that, not in my kitchen because I enjoy cooking, but, I know some people that are pretty horrible cooks and that would probably be really nice.
I do too.
Yeah. So my second prediction for 2017 is popping of one or more of the U.S. monetary bubbles. And I suggested this kind of last year. I'm going to keep this on the predictions list until it happens, because I do think it will happen. Now, these bubbles are, medical care, housing, higher ed, student loans, which I keep separate from higher ed because those get run up a little bit differently. Commercial real estate, warfare, and information technology. We have bubbles in all those things. We have, asset valuations that are way above what kind of market value they're actually serving. We have situations where there's easy money, where things have expanded far beyond the rational level. I mean, you look at some of the Silicon Valley companies coming out right now, what their valuations are. This is very similar to what was happening in 2000. It has happened at different points, before and since. And I think that's coming in one of these areas or another. My personal favorite for this is healthcare, mainly because it's 13% of GDP, as we've previously discussed. It's either 13 or 17. It's enormous, and not all of that is the boomers. And there's a certain point mathematically where things that can't continue don't. And I would think that would probably be the most likely one, but the student loan bubble is also possible.
It'd be interesting to see what happens when that pops.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those, like if healthcare or the student loan bubbles pop, it'll be really messy for the short term, and then things will have to get done to fix that. Because if you don't have healthcare, people die. And if you don't have the ability for people to go to college, that's damaging to their prospects from now on. Mm-hmm. And these are the kind of things that when they go sideways, you fix them. I don't think the warfare bubble will pop. And so, yeah, that's probably going to happen at some point. I think, honestly, it's about overdue. There's a lot of stuff that's really, like when you actually look at it, okay, how much money am I putting in? What do I get out of it for the rest of my days? What's the break even point on that? I mean, I've seen degrees that are, it's like you go and, you get like $100,000 in debt, and, oh, good, I can get a $35K a year job, and I have to be in a major metropolitan area. Well, how long before you can't ever service that debt? And at some point that ends up being a complete loss. And I think reality has been ignored, and reality asserts itself because that's what reality does. It's the thing that persists.
So my next prediction, number 3, is that major PHP legacy apps will start switching to JavaScript frameworks like Node.js. And this actually comes from an article I read early this year about PHP making a comeback, and I disagree with it. And so I'm making the prediction that the opposite of that article, and saying that JavaScript, and especially like Node, is going to take over. And I don't think
WordPress isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, WordPress probably is not going to be leaving PHP, but some of the other ones, I think we're going to see a big shift, because a lot of people are coming out of schools, both boot camps and coding schools and undergrad programs, with a lot of JavaScript and not very much PHP.
Yeah. And I could see this happening. At the very least, I think we're going to see a lot more diversity in the languages being used, just in general. Although I do kind of wonder about the future of Node, specifically in regards to how quickly their stuff churns, and how fragile some things are. I mean, we saw that this year. It's like, oh, I have a library that left pads a number, and that's all it does. I think it was left pad or right pad. I forget which way it was. Pad. It was left pad, and they removed it from the NPM repository and broke the world. And that sort of tendency to that pattern is a little bit concerning as far as the stability of Node.js. However, I do think there's a lot of clever people there. I'm pretty sure they're all aware of this, like painfully.
That was more of an NPM problem then.
Yeah. But the thing is like, okay, well, use Node without NPM and actually be productive.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it's like using C# without Visual Studio. It hurts.
It's possible.
Yeah. But there's all kinds of things that are possible.
Yeah. That's true.
Painful. So I don't know if it'll be Node or it'll be something else.
That's why I didn't say specifically Node. I said like Node.
Yeah.
Angular keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
It's not really built for, it's
for the front end side.
Front end than.
But I thought they had some, they're doing a lot of TypeScript and that sort of stuff on the back end. I could see a mix of maybe like Angular and C#, especially with all the developers are very likely to leave Microsoft's OS. Mm-hmm. That thing is getting more and more unfriendly.
Well, and C# Angular is, well, at least in my world, huge.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm using it and Knockout. And, I don't quite have as much infrastructure as you. I mean, it's a little bit lower ceremony, but I mean, I'm happy with it. It works just fine and it never breaks. And, I think that's quite possible, especially, PHP is actually a fairly decent language.
No, I didn't say anything bad about PHP. It's just the move. I'm seeing a move, and I'm predicting that we're going to see even more of a move away from PHP to where some of the major legacy apps that have held out on PHP are going to start moving towards,
or they're going to get replaced.
Yeah.
In common usage. Part of PHP's problem is the problem that JavaScript had. I guess it still has it, but it isn't as noticeable, and that is that 90% of the code out there is crap. Because they had a long period of time where that was people's first language, and they published stuff and it stayed out there, and there were source code samples that were horrible. And I think they're working to overcome that, but it's going to be a struggle, especially with some of the other frameworks that are in the market. So I could see this. My third prediction, this is a little bit more favorable, and that is revitalization of some rougher parts of the country, places like Detroit, among others. Because I think companies are going to start getting jittery about the risks of offshoring. We've seen some stuff in this previous presidential election that indicated that maybe the incoming administration is not as tolerant of outsourcing. While it's debatable how much of the stuff they're actually going to do or that they, really truly intend to do, it's quite likely that you can make things happen with a threat, not an action. Because people go, oh, well, I could move it out there and I could spend all this capital to build a factory wherever or build a, development team somewhere. And then, you get hit with some massive tax. And so I think that's probably going to cause a revitalization of some of our inner cities. I think parts of Appalachia also, there's some parts that do actually have decent internet in places. And, that are very depressed economically. And that would be a pretty decent place. And, the wages is low. People can still outsource there, but they're outsourcing within the country.
Even Nashville, you don't have to have quite what you need for, something out in like Washington or Silicon Valley or anything like that.
Well, and if the healthcare bubble pops here, we'll be right back in, where we started.
That's true.
Well, and I want to point out things like Detroit, for instance. Detroit went in the toilet. And there's a lot of reasons for it, a lot of speculation, and you can read massive arguments online about it. However, Detroit has got a few things going for it. One of which is ready access to supply lines coming in off the lakes.
Yeah.
They're close to an international border. It's not blazing hot 99% of the time either. And hey, air conditioning is a big expense. There's a lot of advantages to cooler weather. There's downsides as well, but they have a pretty decent labor force. All that stuff is still there. It's just the city hollowed out, and it could be rebuilt.
Well, you know what? I was up in Cleveland.
And Cleveland's another one. A lot of those Rust Belt cities have got potential just waiting to spring.
Well, I was up there for Thanksgiving with my sister and her family, and they had a big grand opening of the public square. They've been spending a lot of effort and money building that back up. And they had like an ice skating rink, an outdoor rink, and the big ceremony for the lighting of the Christmas trees and stuff like that. But I'm looking at it, and I remember right after we graduated, I went up to Cleveland because I looked at a graduate program up there. The program was pretty good, but I was just like, I can't live here. And now I look at it and I go, yeah,
it looks reasonably tolerable.
Yeah, I'm like, it's still got work, but I could live there.
Yeah,
I don't feel bad. My sister living up there. There's good neighborhoods and rough neighborhoods, obviously, but well,
a lot of those places took a pretty good hit, and a lot of they have a similar problem to what Appalachia has had, being politically ignored. And not being able to shift with the times for various reasons. Now they're in a place where they can. I've heard friends from Detroit describe what's happened over like the last 30 years as, was it Hurricane Katrina without the hurricane?
Okay.
Just in terms of the amount of damage done, there's infrastructure that's just rotting. At some point, enough of it goes down or property prices drop low enough. We have expanding population. We have a lot of things still going for this country. And I do think that some of these cities are going to get revitalized now.
Yeah,
and I hope
agree.
to see it.
I think that should be a major effort for our country as a whole, though, is, all right, we have infrastructures that have been built and are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody wants to go off and do the new thing. Well, why don't we go revitalize the old and make the old new again?
Yeah, and it's something a lot of the tech people need to be in on too.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have better... Now, that's not to say that jobs are coming back.
No.
But revenue is coming back, and construction of facilities and all that. Because now we have a lot of technology in our factories that makes it so you don't require as many workers.
Mm-hmm.
That said, these plants and things are in a very good place to build that out, and they do have to have some workers. And you still get knockoff effects to the local economy. You got to still provide power. You still got to provide water. You still got to provide goods and services around those factories.
You and I have both seen what happens to a town when the factory moves out.
Yes, that's not something that's pretty, and there's a lot of places that are just completely destroyed right now because of
we've seen that in the sticks, the rural towns that were factory towns.
Yeah, where there was a sawmill.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Yeah, and it moved out. Everything, the entire economy of that town collapsed. That happened on a large scale.
Yeah, it's happened all over the country. But the thing is collapses like that are, people like to think of those as, hey, this is the end of the world, but it's not. It's economically driven, and economics got you there. Economics will get you out. At some point, we're going to hit an inflection point where it starts going the other way.
Yeah,
just because there's so much opportunity that it would be kind of dumb not to. Like, somebody will figure out how to make this work. So that is my cheerful, upbeat prediction, and the only one I'm giving you.
All right. So my final prediction for 2017 is that Will and I will each speak at a conference this year. We've both been wanting to do it, and I think that we're going to be able to pull it off. You guys have heard me talk about this before, but our friends over at Code Newbies are hosting Codeland conference that's going to be April 21st and 22nd up in New York. And I am actually going to submit a proposal to be a speaker at that. This is the first time I've announced that aspect of it. So I can't promise that I will actually get selected as a speaker, but I am going to put myself out there and try.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah, and if I do, you guys come up and listen to me. If I don't, I'm still going to go to the conference. So if you guys want to come out and meet me at a conference, I will be at Codeland in New York on April 21st and 22nd. That's codelandconf.com.
Yeah, and I haven't really, the guys in my mastermind group are pushing me to do speaking because they both have done presentations and stuff at conferences, and they're like, you have a podcast. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, it's one thing when I'm like sitting across the table from you and drinking a beer, talking, and I know that if I screw up, it gets edited. It's a completely different thing talking in front of people. I mean, it was a little difficult, like Friday, knowing that I was going on .NET Rocks. Just like I didn't sleep well Thursday night, and I mean, I was a complete zombie. By late Friday afternoon. Like, I still owe the place where I work. I've got to work 2 or 3 extra hours this week because, like, my left eye was doing the Columbo thing. Like, when I get tired, my eye drifts. And I couldn't. I had nothing else in the tank after all that.
Well, it's a trust thing because they edit too. But you know me, and we've built that trust.
Yeah, I think it's okay with them. It's one of those things like it's a nervousness that I have to overcome, and I'm not sure exactly where to start. I should probably speak at like...
I was going to suggest you speak at something like Nash.js or .NET User Group.
Yeah.
And we could arrange that.
Oh, yeah. We totally could at one of them or at some other... I've thought about also doing that at one that's not in Nashville.
There's a good idea.
That way I don't... I hate to say this because it sounds kind of bad, but I can have it in the back of my head that, okay, if I totally screw up, these people don't see me again.
Hey, I've got an idea. And we have a friend, our audio guru, who would like this idea too. Let's get in touch with the user group in Atlanta. Take a day trip down to Atlanta, go to one of their meetups.
We could do that.
There you go. And we'll get you speaking at it. Griff, you could talk about the same thing that you talked about on .NET Rocks.
Yeah. Well, and that is one thing that I do plan to do more of is pitching, appearances on podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because it worked out to be a little bit easier than I thought. Like, we asked John Samez to come on. course, we have some friends that we've had on as well, but and then we pitched the idea to .NET Rocks, and none of those things were as hard as I thought they were going to be. Like, legitimately, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's kind of stupid now to be intimidated by that, and so I probably could swing it. I kind of want to go that route a little bit more anyway, because that's a little bit more congruent with what we're doing. But I do want to try the public speaking, in front of a larger group. I haven't quite figured out how I want to do it, and I'm swamped at the moment. So yeah, there's your fourth prediction. And here's my fourth one. One of the major social media networks is going to face plant, either as a result of censorship, intrusive advertising, inability to combat trolling, or a lack of a coherent revenue model. You'll notice that there are 4 potential causes, and there are 2 pairs of causes that it'll be one or the other. They can't get a coherent revenue model, so they do intrusive advertising. Or they don't want intrusive advertising, and now they don't have a revenue model. They censor to get rid of the trolling, and censorship drives people away. Or they allow the trolling, and that drives people away. The social media networks have, to a large degree, set themselves up in a position where they can't win. My prediction for this is probably Twitter. Taking a nosedive. It has a few times already, but Twitter is really good for like short, terse communication. It's got high virality the nastier you are. And they've come out and they've started censoring people. One thing that I found interesting is ISIS recruitment channels on our ISIS recruitment handles and those kind of groups. They're not getting hit. People with certain political opinions in the U.S. are. And it is a private business and they're allowed to do what they're allowed to do. But the problem is once you drop the appearance of being a neutral platform, now people make value judgments about why you block certain groups and you don't block other groups. It's a no-win situation because now you're going to alienate some percentage of your audience doing that. So you pretty much are stuck going, there is censorship or there's not censorship. Censorship is like pregnancy. You are or you're not. You're not sort of censored. You're not sort of pregnant. And
it's one of those things that even a little bit of censorship is censorship. And you're going to alienate people when you censor. You're going to somewhat alienate people when you don't.
Right.
But not to the extreme. Like, you can just say, hey, we don't censor.
Yeah, except for, like actually illegal content.
Well, now that's different.
Yeah, that's a different can of worms, but it's more of a thing, again, not a value judgment, but a thing of, have they crossed this bridge? What are the results of crossing that bridge? And Twitter has definitely done it. Reddit has definitely done it. I mean, Reddit, there's some of the, right-wing groups on Reddit that have been banned. Mm-hmm. There are groups of pedophiles discussing pedophilia that have not. And once you start censoring, like, you have to censor everything objectionable. And then, of course, why are people on social media if they can't ever be objectionable? Right. And so you basically set yourself up in a situation where stuff blows up in your face. It's happening to Facebook. It's happening to Twitter. It's happening to YouTube a little bit. Although realistically, if you've ever read the YouTube comments, you don't have any faith left in humanity anyway. So there's a special breed of people in YouTube comments that's, ooh.
I don't understand YouTube comments. I don't comment on.
Neither do the people that write them.
Yeah. Well,
there's so much word salad there. It's, there's some of them that I've read 3 or 4 times and I can't understand what they're actually trying to say. But a lot of the social media outlets have.
Which I'll be honest, I'm surprised we haven't gotten some meaner comments from people.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that on. Well, I mean, the thing is we do try to stay fairly neutral. We do try to keep the politics and stuff out of the show. We've got our opinions on things like everybody does, but it's not congruent with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I've noticed. I recently watched a movie based on a musical that came out in the mid-90s, Rent.
Okay.
And I was explaining to someone that I was like, it's just so 90s. I love it. And she's like, what was so special about the 90s? It's like,
this crap wasn't going on.
I was like, there was this completely different attitude in the air. It's like,
yeah. And I really do miss that. Like, it's strange looking back on what we lost because, the other thing is I participated in Usenet, like way back, like before we had a web browser.
I did too.
And there were the occasional, trolls on there, but there weren't very many. they weren't as nasty. It was people, joking around, cutting up a little bit. Like it would be considered pretty much average at worst now. Like the worst trolls then were better than the average poster now. So there weren't trolls and there weren't active censorship efforts either, for most things.
Of course, I also remember, and this may be a little bit of nostalgia, which, what nostalgia is. It's picking the past up out of the trash and polishing it off.
Right.
Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah.
Reference to a...
Break out those member berries.
So you finally caught up.
I watched that episode. Or parts of it, yeah.
But seriously, though, I remember trolling back then I don't want to say an art form, but it was like a different way of making you think. It wasn't, I'm going to hurt people or I'm going to be mean. It was, I'm going to be mean and hurtful to get them to think about what they're saying.
Yeah.
Or think about what they're doing.
It's taken a different tone.
At least it was for me.
Yeah, it's definitely taken a different tone. And the other thing, too, is the advertising. Because these companies have, they've spent billions and billions of dollars. Their revenue models are a little bit limited. How do you generate revenue off streaming video? Like, think about just the amount you're paying on bandwidth and storage. And, doing content delivery and, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of security constraints. Like, how are you going to get that back off of ad revenue? You're not. YouTube ads have gotten worse. Facebook ads have gotten worse. Everybody's ad model has gotten worse because, again, we're in a bubble and a lot of folks have pushed stuff that's like, hey, this would be really cool, but we can't afford it.
So I heard something the other day and I can't remember what podcast this was on. This was one of the three big ones that I listened to, 3 or 4 big ones. The person they had on was saying they were predicting that ads were going to go away
to be replaced with unicorn farts.
Well, no, they were saying ads were going to go away because they're going to get so personalized on all our information being out there. And I'm like, what are you smoking? The ad isn't for whether or not you need widget XYZ. It's whether or not you need Google's version or Yahoo's version or Excite's version of Gadget XYZ.
Excite?
I'm just throwing out random names of companies I know.
I was going to say, you buy the Excite version with some of those big round money wheels like the stone ones that the Polynesians carved. Because it's about that old. Wow, I hadn't heard that name in a long time.
I used to have an Excite email account.
Yeah, still excited about it, huh? Yeah, but I really do think that some of these social networks, there's going to be loss of distortion.
Yes.
And a loss of easy money, and something different is going to happen. And let's also bear in mind, too, that there's a few things going on with social networks that people haven't thought about probably as much. I think it's the number 2 stockholder in Twitter is a Saudi oil prince. So think about, billions and billions of dollars influencing things on Twitter. Think about the fact that a lot of these organizations are very happy to help the U.S. government, giving them information, about your connections, about, what you posted in private groups, all this stuff, right? If you're 2 hillbillies from Tennessee, nobody realistically cares. However, let's say that you're a CEO of a Fortune 50 company, or you're on the board of directors, or you and, 10 other people are on the board of directors. Government just got complete SIGINT on everything that you are doing. So did foreign actors. Because remember, there's foreign investments and all this stuff. How much pressure can be applied without actually committing a felony on these people? And what can you do with that pressure? It's pretty alarming the more you think about it. And I think at some level that is starting to be realized and something is going to shift. Now, that shift is not necessarily good, not necessarily bad. It is an opportunity in the market because, as these things break up, everybody's got a Twitter integration. Everybody's got a Facebook integration. Everybody's got this and that and whatever. But as the new players come out, new opportunities arise because they have different business models because they're not going to build stuff based on advertising when these others are tanking because of it. So this is just something to bear in mind. It's not gloom and doom. None of the ones I threw out really are. It's just you have to figure out how to leverage it.
Exactly. I can get behind this one. It is kind of, like you said, most of yours were kind of on the darker side, whereas mine were on the lighter, but that matches our personalities.
Well, and let's just go straight into tricks of the trade from here. Think about distortion of things and breaking of things. not in terms of, I've got to hold on to this thing. Like you and I were talking, wistfully about the 90s, but do you remember how much it sucked? Do you remember the bad things? Because they were there.
Oh yeah.
You can try to hold on to stuff, but it's not going to be there. Putting a value judgment on change doesn't really help you very much. Like, yes, you can be sad. You can be like, oh, this is horrible and this makes my life miserable. And there's, to some degree that's a completely human emotion, but it's also one of those things that you have to get over if you want to be successful. You have to look at it and go, okay, what is the upside of what's happening, however bad it is? There were people like, when the Spanish flu was going across Europe and killed like 20 million people. There's people that made bank off of that. That doesn't mean that you become this like vulture capitalist, feed on the poor, but it's also a thing of, hey, look, this is going to happen whether I do something or not. And I can help people and make money. Like I can help them. I can help me. It's a value neutral thing. And once you get in that mindset of how's this stuff going to shift, that's where you make your gains. You don't make it based off of, oh, well, I'm upset because, net neutrality is going away. Well, guess what? If net neutrality goes away, how's it going to go away? Well, it's probably not going to be bandwidth caps. It's going to be peak bandwidth caps. It's going to be streaming caps. It's going to be an opportunity for you to build a device that allows people to stream movies to it at a lower speed and then watch the movie from buffered storage. It's going to be...
Not a DVR.
Yeah, it's basically going to be a DVR that's internet-based. It's going to be a opportunity for you to come up with ways to get around the bandwidth restrictions one way or another. It's going to be an opportunity to come up with a better video codec that has higher compression. Netflix just changed their stuff over because, they're getting eaten alive.
Mm-hmm.
There's always opportunity in chaos. There's not opportunity when things are stagnant. It's like the mindset of, life isn't fair. And everybody goes, oh, that's horrible. Life isn't fair. It's like, look, if life was fair, you'd get exactly what you deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. You would be stuck. The fact that life is not fair means that there's opportunity. And as adults, we've got to realize that you seize that opportunity. You don't wallow in the fact that you don't have it. And it's not so much a, hoorah, let's go do something, but it's a thing of, how much do you want to live your life being afraid? So that's what I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with the news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.